Hey there everyone, Tyler here again. We're back with our second installment of what we're sort of calling the Voile Show. Today, here again with Dave, and we're gonna be breaking down the Scarpa T4 versus the Crispi Svartisen. We're gonna get into these two boots, why someone would wanna choose one over the other. We're gonna kind of define what these boots specifically are good for, where they thrive, maybe where they feel a little bit undergunned. And then we're also going to talk binding pairings, which is a really crucial element, when we're talking about these XCD boots, pairing it up with the right binding for what you want to do. So yeah, we're just going to go ahead and get into it and talk XCD boots once again. So yeah, you ready to get rolling here?
Let's do it.
Sweet. Right off the bat, last time we talked about the Alpina Alaska compared to the Crispi Svartisen. Now, obviously, we're still talking about the Svartisen, but compared to the Scarpa T4. Now, generally speaking, what style, what type of XCD skiing are these two boots going to be more geared towards?
There's a pretty big gap between the performance, the weight, the flex of the two boots. I would say that, at least in this case, in the previous video, we discussed that the Alpina Alaska 75 was touring and the Svartisen was more turning. Now it's a little bit of a different comparison where I would describe the Svartisen as more of the touring focused boot, and the T4 is very much focused on turning.
Before we get too ahead of ourselves here, we want to real quick break down some of the terminology that we'll be using when talking about XCD skiing and the products. Now, as we all know, XCD skiing is a niche within the niche of telemark skiing, and within the niche of XCD skiing, there's even more niches. It's important to us to help define what these niches or groupings are so we can better communicate to you what products might be right for you and help find the right setup. Right now we have XCD skiing, cross-country downhill, which is a good general term, a heavy emphasis on the touring and explorative skiing. The next step up in terms of gear is what we're calling XCD Crossover, or XCD-X. It puts the downhilling a bit more into the spotlight. It's more capable, it's more confident when it comes to descending while you're skiing. If you want a full breakdown on this entire subject, we made a page on our website that goes a bit more in depth, and we'll also be covering this topic here in the future. So we'll have a link that's going to pop up right here in the corner that will bring you to the web page that breaks down XCD Crossover so you can get a better feel for what that term is. And yeah, we'll be bringing it up in the conversation, so let us know if you have any questions or comments. Thanks for tuning in. The T4 versus the Crispi Svartisen.
XCD, at least described from the type of skis that we're promoting or that we're building, is in the XCD category is the Endeavor BC, and that's a scale-based ski. In a 178, it's 84 millimeters underfoot. As we're describing XCD Crossover, you could jump up to the Ultra Vector BC, and in a 177 length, that's going to be 96 millimeters underfoot. And the T4 is very much appropriate for that pairing. My experience with the Svartisen is, while it's a great turning boot and touring boot, my experience is I've got to do a bigger radius turn. I've got to set the turn and then hold the turn. Whereas with the T4, I can do faster transitions, more of what might be described as like parallelomark. So there are some pretty distinct differences in that downhill performance. It's incredible if you looked at the differences. Certainly the weight is a difference. Flex is going to be a difference naturally. You got leather, plastic, and performance. You're going to get a higher performing boot with the T4 for the downhill side. And we'll get into the binding pairings because it's interesting what we discovered with the T4 and the Svartisen. We'll give you guys some real good details on what the best pairings are and what the issues might be trying to pair, say for example, the Svartisen with a switchback.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's, interest from consumers out there for these two boots, people who are shopping between these two boots. What would you say is similar about them? I know it's maybe not a ton, but why do you think folks are looking at these two boots, comparing them side by side?
Just naturally, just low cuff. They're lighter weight in their categories. I mean, for example, the T4 is lighter than a T2 and some of the other older 4-buckle plastic telemark boots. So I think folks are really geared to, they want something that is less weight to carry, but still can give them some decent performance, both touring and turning.
Sure. And you kind of already touched on it a little bit, but what would you say is like a core difference between these two boots?
The differences in the two boots, it's a pretty big jump from a leather boot, even though it has the exoskeleton on the boot, that adds a lot to the performance. But it's a pretty big jump. I mean, you're jumping up in weight, you're jumping up in a stiffer flex,
Yep.
and thus, great benefit is the performance.
Sure.
If your priority is you want to, and I think you could describe it too, is that maybe this would be, at least in my own experience, maybe geared more to low angle terrain. You could push it a little bit more with the T4. Steeper angles, longer ski tours, and a variety of terrain.
Sure, yeah. So they're similar boots in that they kind of both exist, in this XCD crossover category as viable options, but core differences is the downhill DNA is quite a bit more present in the T4.
Definitely.
That's kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, cool. With that being said, we're going to jump in to talking about on-snow performance now, and we're going to dive in specifically on these boots one at a time. So first, we're going to start here with the T4. So the Scarpa T4, what would you say is the ideal skier type for this boot?
I think some of that is prioritizing telemark turns. They want that fast transitions between the turns, stability, and it performs. You'll see it in the skiing clips that, and like I've described, is with I can do more faster transitions, more of what I describe as parallelomark turns.
Transitions between turns.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And with the Crispi Svartisen, I'm dropping into a turn and I'm setting that turn and I'm holding that turn, bigger radius turns.
Sure.
Definitely with the T4, you can do lots of short radius turns.
Yeah.
Fast, like I said, faster transitions.
Cool. And how would you describe the flex rating on this boot?
Definitely much more stiff than the leather Svartisen boot. That's going to be very distinct.
Yeah.
But again, it's a trade-off in that regard. You want more performance. If you harken back to like the early 90s when that's all there was leather boots, and then the first Scarpa T1 came on the market, and it was a big jump in performance, and people were really pushing it then, and as the sport really progressed as a result of that.
Yeah, quite a bit stiffer.
Definitely.
Comfort-wise, how would you describe this boot?
I think there's a similar comfort there. I mean, the leather Svartisen boot is spectacular right out of the box. It's the most comfortable leather boot that I've ever skied in. It's a great product for sure. Whereas the T4, it is a comfortable boot, and you can mold the liner in this boot to make it even more comfortable. I mean, it is a plastic ski boot, so it's got a break in. Although my experience with the T4 was good out of the box.
Nice. Cool. And what would you say is like the terrain sweet spot for this boot?
Yeah, medium angle terrain, low angle terrain. You can do a lot with this. I mean, even though it's 2-buckle, you can do a heck of a lot with the boot.
Where would you say this boot feels overpowering? What's the context in which this boot might be too much for somebody?
If you're just focused mostly on touring and turning on low angle, it might be more than you need.
Yeah, and that of course is you get a weight penalty and you're over booting yourself essentially.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Okay, and then where would you say this boot feels undergunned terrain wise?
If you're on pretty steep terrain, maybe it's variable snow conditions or it's bumped out. If you're inside the ski area, even with the conditions we've got recently, it might if you're on really steep terrain, it might be a little undergunned.
Sure.
Or you may want to consider a jump up to T2 or NTN.
Gotcha.
Scarpa T4 Pro.
So despite being a plastic boot, it still is low cuff, 2-buckle, very minimal. Great high-powered XCD boot, but it's not a resort boot.
Not necessarily, no.
Yeah. So now that we covered the T4 here, let's shift focus and talk specifically about the Svartisen. So the Crispi Svartisen, what is the ideal skier type for this boot?
Well, someone that is skiing, touring and turning in low-angle terrain, they're prioritizing the comfort, the lightweight. It's the boot. The Svartisen is just incredibly lightweight. It is, like I said, it's the most comfortable leather boot I've ever used. It's easy flex. You can buy the boot, take it out of the box, and go ski it. But I would say terrain selection, as you're asking, is terrain's typically going to be low angle. And as I've described, is that if I'm turning with the boot, I'm doing larger radius turns. I'm getting into the turn, I'm setting the turn, holding it. I'm not doing super fast transitions between turns.
Right. Cool. Yeah. And then flex and feel. How does this boot feel and flex underfoot?
Super comfortable. Easy flex. It's super easy to do a drop knee turn. Super easy to walk in the boot.
Sure.
It's spectacular.
Yeah, and that's something I guess we didn't touch on when we highlighted the Svartisen specifically. You know, since this is a plastic boot, it does have a walk mode that you need to flip up for your cruising around. And you know, I'm sure there are some people who would ski this boot with the walk mode up, and I'm sure there's others who would ski with it down. But that is the nature of it being plastic. It's going to flex and walk a little bit differently than one of these leather boots. So yeah, you can see this one, pretty simple walk mode mechanism. It's just this kind of block here, can flip up, and it's fully buckled right now, so you can't really see the flex of it all. But do that, and now it's blocked for skiing. Overall, this boot is quite comfortable, a very easy, smooth flex, walks well, turns well but longer, swoopier turns, you know, slower transitions from, you know,
that's my experience
left to right ski. Yeah. We kind of already touched on it, but the comfort aspect of this boot.
It's well padded, so you're not, I mean, I didn't find it was so comfortable right out of the box. It's just, I'm amazed at how comfortable it is. And like I said, if you're just focused touring and a little bit of turning on low angle, it's spectacular.
And then, once again, we already kind of touched on this, but the terrain sweet spot for this boot, you mentioned, was low angle touring and turning.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep, definitely.
Cool. And how does it feel when you like creep up into some more like medium angle sort of stuff? Is that going to be pretty dependent on just the snow quality, or?
I mean, if it's firm snow, you're going to maybe struggle a little bit. Definitely need to set the turn and hold it longer, larger radius turns for sure.
Sure. Where does this boot feel overpowered, if in any context?
I mean, if you were just solely focused on walking, it's probably more boot than you need. You could go to a lighter setup, maybe even jump to Explore.
Sure.
Rotafil Explore. So I'd say that if you're just primarily on terrain that's just you're walking, then it's probably more boot than you need.
Gotcha. And where would you say this boot feels a little bit undergunned?
I think if you get in pretty firm snow, and the Svartisen would be a little undergunned if you were in steeper terrain or really variable snow conditions. You might struggle. Again, I think you just got to make sure you hold the turn, just make a bigger radius turn for stability.
Yeah. So now that we covered the boots individually, we're going to go ahead and dive into the binding options here, and we're going to pair up these boots with specific binding options and kind of give you an idea of what pairings we like to make and which ones are going to be best for certain styles of XCD skiing. First off, we're going to start again with the T4 here. Let's talk about the primary binding choice for this boot for the XCD crossover sort of category.
Well, that was what was really interesting about the testing that we did and the skiing we did with the two boots. The primary pairing is the Voile Switchback. It's got a rigid heel assembly that mates perfectly with a plastic boot. But what was very interesting is we tested the T4 with the 3-pin cable. And it does work with the 3-pin cable. It would work with other cable bindings that we have, the 3-pin cable traverse. It's a little bit of a tight fit because the boot sole's a little wider, so you got to be a little bit more careful to get into the 3-pin cable. But what's interesting is the T4 mates with everything down to a 3-pin cable up to a Switchback X2 binding. So you got a lot of options there with that. Now, it should be noted that you got to be careful getting into the 3-pin cable, getting the duckbill over the pins. But I was really surprised at how well it paired with the 3-pin cable. I mean, we generally promote using the Switchback because it, performance-wise, you've got the free pivot of the Switchback. It's the perfect pairing, but you do have a lot of options with the T4. That's what I was most surprised by.
Sure. Kind of have to do that trick when you're pressing down on the toe piece of the cable with this boot. Lift up your heel a little bit so you can.
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
and
work it in.
You'll see that in the skiing clips, is that you open the bail and elevate the heel a little bit to get onto the pins, and then you can use your pole to clamp the bail down.
Nice. Let's talk about the Switchback specifically, which is our primary binding pairing for this boot. What is the ideal use case for that as a setup, this boot and this binding?
It's exactly like we described earlier. You can do a lot with that medium angle terrain. You can do telemark turns. You can do fast transitions between your turns. It's a great pairing because they're well matched performance-wise.
Yeah.
Fit and performance for sure.
Nice. And what would you say is like the standout feature of pairing this boot with this binding?
Yeah, I would say the standout feature is that you've got the free pivot, so it's frictionless uphill touring, whereas you're going to get some resistance if you were to tour in the 3-pin cable. Although I would say that if you pair the leather boot with 3-pin cable, you've got a flexible boot that pairs well with that.
Sure.
Easier walking.
Yeah, totally. Cool. And then what, if any, are the trade-offs of pairing T4 with a Switchback?
I don't really think there's any trade-off there. I think it's, I suppose, if we were to describe the performance, the Switchback has the hinge point of the heel assembly is more forward, so it's more neutral. If you want more downhill performance in the binding, but have the same free pivot, you would jump to the X2, which is the chassis of that binding is a little further back, and so you're going to get a little more power in the turn.
So overall, pairing it with the Switchback is a great XCD crossover pairing. You have the free pivot efficiency, which is really nice on a scaled ski. I mean, you literally just flick the mechanism with your pole and you're walking, flick it back and you're turning.
That's what's so great that's what's so great about the Switchback and the X2 version of it, is you put the boot in and you don't have to get out of it. You don't have to mess with the heel assembly. You're just flipping the switch for free pivot touring. Back and forth. It's very convenient.
So if you're cruising through, medium angle rolling terrain, it's really nice because you're never having to get out of the ski.
That's what's incredible. With scale-based ski, you just keep flipping the switch if you're in rolling terrain and there's no skins. You don't have to get out of the binding. It's really, really efficient, really convenient.
Totally, which I think is valuable for, typically people who are shopping for these XCD setups, efficiency and simplicity is the reason, and this seems about as efficient and simple as you can get, if you're planning on making some turns.
And for the performance, the weight of the setup, it's still reasonable. Compared to the performance you're getting.
What is the net effect of moving down in binding? So you have the T4 and you're saying, you know what, I want to go down to the 3-pin cable. What's the reason for doing that? How does that change your approach?
You're gonna get the simplest binding. You're gonna drop the weight, but the trade-off is definitely going to be you're going to get a little bit of resistance when you lift your heel. You can detach the cable assembly and lock that cable assembly off. It should be noted that we will update this heel so that that is better facilitated, where you can lock the cable assembly off. If you really want to drop a lot of weight, you can drop down to the 3-pin cable, but you just don't get the uphill touring efficiency with a full free pivot binding.
The ideal use case for a 3-pin cable paired with the T4 is someone who wants to do all the same things, but they just want to shave a bit of weight, and they're willing to sacrifice the free pivot for the weight savings.
Absolutely, and I think that, at least in my experience, you could, as far as downhill performance, you can, because of the boot, you can do everything in the 3-pin cable that you were doing in the switchback in terms of downhill performance.
Right.
It's just like like we talked about, is that free pivot is amazing.
Sure.
For uphill efficiency.
Totally. And we'll drop weights right here, so you can kind of compare the switchback binding and the 3-pin cable here. We will drop weights right here between the Crispi Svartisen and the Scarpa T4, so you can see what that trade-off is. And then what would you say is a standout feature of pairing this with the 3-pin cable?
I mean, really, it is the weight. I think but it should be noted that, as we discussed earlier about the pivot point of the heel assembly, the switchback is a little more neutral, whereas the 3-pin cable, the hinge point of the cable assembly is a little further back, so you can get a little more power in the turn.
Yeah.
But you can address that if you want a similar performance to the 3-pin cable. You would jump to the X2 binding.
Sure.
The Switchback X2.
Yep. And then we already addressed it, but the trade-offs really with this binding is that you're just not getting the free pivot.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's
gain on the weight, but you just don't get the completely frictionless uphill touring.
Totally. And what you're saying too is that it is still a strong downhill performer, similar to the switchback, because of where that pivot point is when you're turning.
I mean, it's what I skied on, for many years when I first started teleskiing with a plastic boot. So it's amazing the performance you get out of this binding using the T4.
Nice. All right, now let's discuss the Crispi Svartisen and binding pairings. What would you say is our suggested primary binding pairing for this boot, for this XCD crossover, XCD style of skiing?
Definitely the 3-pin cable binding. You could jump up to the 3-pin cable traverse, and that's just the 3-pin cable with a 10mm riser, but that's the perfect fit for this boot. And that's the interesting thing about this whole setup here, or comparison, is that the T4, you can go down to the 3-pin cable. You've got a wide range of bindings with the T4. But with the Svartisen, it is our view that you should stay with a 3-pin binding. Whether you're going down to an HD Mountaineer, which is a cableless 3-pin binding that Voile sells, or just the straight 3-pin cable. From a customer service point of view, we've had a lot of questions regarding, can I use the Svartisen in the switchback? And we don't recommend it, because putting the boot into that setup is, you'll see, we'll do a demo on that. The heel assembly is so rigid on the switchback, and the boot is a softer flexing boot, that you don't get, the springs don't even engage. So it's just not a good pairing at all. It doesn't work. I know people want the free pivot with the Svartisen, and we'll address that, but right now the regular switchback with the rigid heel assembly, it just doesn't work. You can't get any spring engagement on it. It's just not quite right.
Sure. So the 3-pin cable paired up with the Crispi Svartisen here. What would you say is the ideal use case for this setup, this pairing?
Definitely walking, touring, and low angle turning.
Nice.
And my experience with the boot binding setup is you're dropping into a turn, holding that turn, larger radius turns. It's interesting because the 3-pin cable was originally designed for leather boots in the late 80s, early 90s, the flexible spring works very well with the softer, easy flexing leather boot.
Sure.
It's the perfect pairing.
Talking standout features of this pairing, that would be one. I'd also think that just the general weight savings pairing a cable binding with this sort of boot is another one.
Absolutely. You've got a light boot, comfortable, easy flex. The binding is incredibly light. You know, if you're gonna walk anywhere, if you're gonna do some turning, low angle turning, it's a perfect setup.
Nice. And then the trade-off is, I guess we're talking just about all this gear, is that you just don't have a free pivot.
Well, it's a great point. Yeah, you can you can take the cable off the heel of the boot and stow it on the heel pad. That is an upgrade that we're going to be adding to the 3-pin cable. And you can walk just with the duckbill in the bail and the pins, and that's reasonable because you got a flexible boot, but you still get some resistance. So it's hard to compare it to a free pivot binding,
Sure.
like the Switchback.
Totally. And in regards to pairing a boot like this with a free pivot binding like the Switchback, what are our thoughts on pairing this kind of boot with a free pivot?
Well, it's a great question, and we get the question a lot from our customers, is that can I use the Crispi Svartisen or a leather boot in the Switchback? And our answer is no, because you've got a real rigid heel assembly, and it just doesn't pair well with a flexible boot. And we'll show you, we'll put the boot in the binding, and it's a struggle just to get the heel assembly on. And then on top of that, the springs don't even preload or engage when you lift the heel. So it just doesn't work. But we do have a solution coming for that.
Yeah, totally. Well, let's just get into it. We have this binding right here, which we'll show you a little bit more close up. But yeah, what do you want to call this?
So it's the Switchback cable. This 3-pin cable, Switchback cable, and having this heel assembly on the Switchback, you're going to get the benefits of the free pivot, and the cable assembly is just, you get a natural flex with this cable assembly on the Switchback. It's a perfect fit. You'll see it as we demonstrate it, that it engages as you lift the heel, so you're going to get the performance of that. Obviously, you're going up a little bit in weight with the Switchback cable, but you've got the benefit of the free pivot.
Yes, and I should say that we have been riding on this binding. This isn't just proto sitting here. We've actually been skiing on it, and yeah, it's a great pairing. We're really stoked on it. So I'd say generally on the Switchback cable, look out for some more information coming hopefully pretty soon on this binding. We've already put some teasers, some pretty obvious, not so secret teasers out there about it. But yes, it's standout feature here, like Dave just said, is a free pivot with a leather boot, which for the people who don't care about the weight savings as much and more just want the simplicity and the efficiency, this is going to be a pretty interesting option. There is going to be some sort of trade-offs here, and I'm guessing it's weight is going to be the main one. Is there anything else that comes to mind, or is that really it?
It's really the weight. You'll get the benefit of the free pivot compared to the 3-pin cable. You just got to carry a little more weight, but it's not unreasonable.
Yeah.
One thing to take into account is the Switchback or the Switchback cable has a hinge point that's a little more neutral, further forward, whereas the 3-pin cable is a little further back, so you can get a little more power out of the turn.
Yep.
So the downhill performance will be different in the two bindings.
Sure.
So that should be noted.
What it sounds like to me is you have a pretty neutral free pivot binding that you can pair with a leather boot. It's going to be a little bit heavier than a cable binding, but I mean, if you don't want to touch climbing skins at all and you hate transitioning when you're on an XCD setup, this is going to be a really compelling option.
Absolutely. You can get the boot in the binding, and then you don't have to get out of it. You don't have to mess with the heel assembly. You can just flip the switch. It's very compelling. very efficient.
Totally. And yeah, we wanted to talk a little bit about who this setup, this binding would be for, but we kind of just touched on it. Yeah, the person who just wants the simplest, most efficient setup, really, for this XCD style of skiing.
So the performance differences are different between 3-pin cable, downhill performance that is,
Yeah.
because of where the cable hinge points are on the binding.
Right.
More neutral with the switchback, a little more active with the 3-pin cable binding.
That kind of covers our boot and binding breakdown here. We just have a couple more things to touch on here. Let's dive in on some buying guidance for somebody who is, sort of stuck choosing between these kinds of setups here. So let's talk boots again really quick. What would your advice be for someone who is stuck choosing between Crispi Svartisen and the T4 here?
Like I said earlier, there's a big jump in the weight and performance. It's obvious with the full plastic boot that you're going to get a lot more performance. If you're wanting to make a lot of telemark turns or a lot of turns in general, whether those are parallel or telemark, definitely choose the T4. If you're just focused on walking or touring and making some turns on low angle terrain, the leather Svartisen is a good fit with that.
The sort of terrain bias here would be more low angle.
Definitely.
With the Svartisen.
Yep.
If the snow's soft and not variable, maybe you could creep into some medium angle, but it's that long swoopy turn. You're making the stability for yourself with your turn shape.
That's just
more
my,
so than
my
leaning
style.
on the boot.
I'm setting the turn, I'm holding
Right.
the turn because it's lower cuff and softer boot.
Yep. And then the terrain for this one, it sits pretty firmly in that medium angle sort of terrain.
Definitely.
Nice.
Yeah.
And because it's plastic, if the snow is a little bit variable, it can handle it better than a leather boot.
A lot more
would, per
stability.
se. Yeah.
Yep.
You kind of touched on this, but the downhill priority. If you're in low angle, but you're looking to make turns, this is a great option.
Absolutely.
You want to go steeper. Downhill really is a priority in your XCD crossover setup, T4.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's touch a little bit on the touring side of it, because you do have to walk to get to where you're going to be making turns. Let's talk about the touring length and frequency, how that plays into maybe this boot decision here.
Well, I say the way to describe it is how amazingly comfortable the Svartisen is and how lightweight the Svartisen and the 3-pin cable are. It's going to be a great choice for a long touring day where you're just prioritizing touring over turning. Mm-hmm. And whereas you're carrying a lot more weight, it's a stiffer boot. I mean, you can mitigate that some by the free pivot on the switchback to help with touring efficiency. But the Svartisen is going to be the best for those really long walking, long touring days.
Yeah, and you can still put down really long days in this boot. It's just going to be a little bit heavier. So if you're okay with that, this is still a good option.
If you want to carry the weight,
yeah,
and you're out there and you want to do more, if you're really prioritizing turning, telemark turns, this setup is the best for that, for sure.
Yeah. So who is the Svartisen wrong for?
Someone that's prioritizing medium angle terrain. If they're just wanting to go do lots of turns, it might be a little undergun for that.
Sure. Cool. And then who would the T4 be wrong for?
If they're looking just to do mostly touring,
yeah,
they're going to be carrying a lot more weight with that. It might be more boot and binding that they really need.
Sweet. Cool. And now we're going to real quick get into some rapid fire here just to close this whole thing out. So I'm just going to throw them at you, and just first thing that comes to mind, more forgiving boot.
Yeah, it would be the leather Svartisen.
What is the more powerful boot?
T4.
What is the lighter boot?
Svartisen.
Which one is better for long days?
Svartisen for long touring days.
Which one is better for making turns?
T4.
Which one's better for newer telemark skiers?
I would say the T4 just because you're going to get the stability and performance as a new tele skier.
Which one is better for more experienced tele skiers?
It's a good question. I think that experienced telliers can enjoy both boots, but it just depends on their priorities. If your priority is doing fewer turns, use the Svartisen. If you really want to do more turning on medium angle terrain, use the T4.
Nice. Well, cool. That wraps up our discussion here. Thanks for tuning in. That is the breakdown between the Crispi Svartisen and the T4. We dove in on XCD skiing, sort of defined XCD crossover, talked binding pairings, talked a new binding that we're going to be coming out with here soon. So we covered a lot of ground. That wraps up our discussion here. I hope we were able to help you out. As always, these are just our opinions. Feel free to let us know in the comments what you think about these boots and these bindings. And we'll see you next time for our next discussion.